This episode is sponsored by Realtor.com, who wants you to take advantage of your free profile on Realtor.com. By claiming and completing your free profile, adding a photo, and all of the information that puts you head and shoulders above the competition, you're on your way to receiving free leads, helping search engines find you, and staying top of mind with past clients. To learn more about claiming your free profile, go to Realtor.com/profile.
Welcome to the Real View podcast, where Ohio Realtors connect you to innovators and influencers, keeping you with the real view of real estate. Whether you're a broker, agent, first-time homebuyer, industry leader, or just happen to stumble upon our podcast today, you can expect to hear tips, tools, tricks, interesting information, and so much more from the experts in Ohio's real estate game.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Real View podcast. I'm your host, Allison Wiley, and today we are back with the special edition of Ohio Policy Talk. It's been a couple months. I was just looking back before we started recording, and February was our last episode, so we thought now would be a great time to record something new, share with you all what's been going on in the legislative world and all of the wins that we've had, and there's been a lot. So I'd like to welcome back to the podcast, Andrew Huffman, who is the Assistant Vice President of Governmental Affairs here at Ohio Realtors. And he's going to share with us everything that he's been working on for the past couple months. Andrew, welcome back to the show, and we're so happy to have you.
Allison, happy to be here.
So let's just first start at the beginning with our advocacy efforts here at Ohio Realtors. This is something that I think is one of our strongest pillars, one of the real cornerstones of what we do here at Ohio Realtors for our members and for really the association and the real estate industry as a whole. How have we been so successful with our efforts here in the advocacy world and in protecting what our members care about and what we care about from an association standpoint?
And really, to me, it comes down to the respect that lawmakers have for the association and our members. I mean, it's so rewarding when I talk to lawmakers and say, hey, I was able to speak to one of your members and they filled me in on this legislation, and I was able to make an informed decision because of that discussion. And, for us, that's just vital, that when we go to the statehouse, we know that we're going to be welcomed in all 132 offices and that they really take what we have to say to heart. And that's what we have really tried to enhance over the last couple of years, is connecting our members directly with legislators and getting them involved in the legislative process through testimony, meeting with lawmakers, participating in statehouse days, things like that. And I have to make a plug for our state political coordinator program and our federal political coordinator program, the SPC or FPC program. It's one of the best member engagement programs in the state of Ohio. Every association kind of has a member engagement system out there, but ours is second to none. And these programs, maybe I should explain what the programs are first. The SPC program is where we connect one of our members with each legislature at the state house. And this allows us to really ramp up advocacy efforts literally overnight. We can send an email to our SPCs, and by the end of the week, we know those SPCs contacted their lawmakers, urging them to support or oppose a position that's being discussed at the state house. So it really has been an effective tool for our advocacy efforts. And, I take the approach, yes, it's our job to try to pass legislation that benefits our members and protect private property rights, but it's also our responsibility just to educate legislators. They will be asked to cast votes on thousands of issues, and they're not going to be experts in every single area, including housing policy. So it really is our responsibility as an association to educate them and really explain to them, how does this bill impact your constituents? And if lawmakers choose to vote against us after having all the information, then that's their choice. But fortunately, for the most part, once we're able to explain to them how this would impact housing in their communities, we've been pretty successful.
Yeah, it's really been great to watch the efforts, and I know our members see that and are very aware and appreciative of that too. And I have to say, it is a testament to the amazing team that we have here on our staff, in addition to, yes, the strength of our FPC and SPC programs, but really the work that you all do, Andrew, you and your team, in working hard for us, advocating for us. I mean, I know that President Whitley had said some comments that she was over at the statehouse talking to a legislator, and they were just raving about you and how amazing it's been to work with you. So on our behalf and behalf of the staff here at OR and all of our members and everyone listening, thank you guys for the work that you do too, because that should not go without saying as well. So we think we have the best, one of the best lobbying teams out there, and that's because of you and your team and the work that you guys do. So have to shout out you guys as well as everything else that you mentioned.
Thank you so much. And again, it comes back to just the respect. As long as legislators respect us, they will hear what we have to say. And it's a responsibility that I know myself and our entire team takes extremely seriously, is upholding the respect and the credibility that Ohio Realtors provides at the State House.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you guys do a great job. So thanks for all that you do for us. I want to talk about the current General Assembly, the 135th Ohio General Assembly that has been around, most recently working over at the State House. It's been quite an interesting session. If you have read anything in the news about what's going on there, I'm sure that you have heard little rumblings of what's been going on, but it's been very interesting, especially with the speakership and what's going on at the House of Representatives. Can you break down for us a little bit of what has been going on over there? Why has this situation been so chaotic, and what it's been like to work during these crazy times?
Yeah, Allison, you hit the nail on the head. It's chaotic is the appropriate term. So many people focus on Congress at the federal level, and I know there was some controversy over selecting a speaker at the federal level, but we've run into the same issues here in Ohio. The Ohio General Assembly functions in 2-year cycles, and it started in 2023, so we're about a year and a half in. And initially, it had some chaos. It had some controversy. The current speaker, Speaker Jason Stevens, who's a Republican, and I should say that Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And you would think that they would all be on the same page and things would be functioning smoothly, but it's been anything but that. So Speaker Stevens was selected as Speaker, but he only was able to receive 22 Republican votes. And he actually had more Democrats vote for him than Republicans. And there were about 40 or so Republicans that voted against him. And I thought that after Stevens was selected, that they would be able to bury the hatchet and all come together, but that just has not happened. So the 40 or so Republicans who did not vote for Stevens, they are calling themselves the majority caucus, and they have been pushing back against really any initiatives that Stevens has been trying to pass. And kind of adding to the chaos, Allison, is the Senate president. So Matt Huffman, Senate President Matt Huffman, also a Republican. He is term limited in the Senate, and he's running for the House of Representatives. And he would like to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives in 2025. And so he is reaching out to these 40 or so disgruntled Republicans in the House and really building an alliance for next year. And that has created even more distance, I'll say, between the House and the Senate. So not only is there infighting within the Republican Party in the House, but now there's a fight between the House and Senate. And it's led to a very ineffective legislative session. We've only seen a couple dozen bills pass, and that makes it about the least effective legislature in terms of passing legislation since about the 1950s. So it's been difficult to get things done, but fortunately, most of the issues that we work on aren't overly partisan, and usually there's a solid reasoning for why we're pushing our policies. So we've been able to kind of navigate these waters delicately, but it has created some, as you said, chaos.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time for sure over at the State House. And I know, as I mentioned, just in reading articles and things like that, hearing what's going on, this has been a very unique time and has made our jobs a little bit more interesting and maybe even a little bit more difficult than what they usually are. And you're right. I mean, only 24 bills passed. That is just, wow. That's 1950. That's pretty crazy times. Have we been able to be productive during this? I mean, I know we talked about some of the wins that we've had and things like that, but has Ohio Realtors been able to really get anything through knowing everything that's been going on externally over at the State House?
Yeah, Allison, fortunately, one of the bills that was passed was the state operating budget, which is a massive piece of legislation. It's about 6,000 pages long, and there's thousands of policy proposals in this bill. And we were able to view this budget process as an opportunity. We knew this bill was going to pass, so what could we get out of it? And we were able to go to work, and we passed a number of policies that were favorable to our members. One is an issue that we've been working on for probably 6 or 7 years. It's a savings account that Ohioans could open and for the purchase of a new home. And the best part about these savings account programs, Ohioans who open them up and make contributions would be able to deduct those contributions from their state income tax. And that was the proposal that, again, we've been pushing for about 6 years. And lawmakers really took this and ran with it. And what they ended up passing was the Ohio Homebuyer Plus Savings Account Program. And it functions like I described. An Ohioan would open up the account, make contributions to that account, and would be able to deduct up to $5,000 for a single filer and $10,000 per year for joint filers from their state income taxes. And really, the only caveat for the program is that the money in the account has to be spent towards the purchase of a new home. And it has to be a primary residence. It can't be an investment property. So you're talking about deductions. They would be capped through the life of the savings account at $25,000. But that's a significant reduction in your income taxes. And the best part about this program, not only do you get the tax savings, but then we were able to partner with the state treasurer's office as well as our financial institutions. And the accounts will earn an above market interest rate. So you get about a 2.5% additional interest rates on these savings accounts. So it's a really exciting program. Some other states have had similar programs created, but ours is probably the best in the nation. In the first 5 months of this becoming operational at the beginning of the year, we've seen over 7,000 accounts opened already. So it's really taken off, and it's been very, very successful, and hopefully will allow more Ohioans to achieve the dream of home ownership. So that was really an exciting policy that we were able to get done. In that same vein, I mentioned the budget covers a number of topics. We also knew that we needed to address the housing shortage. And so we worked with lawmakers and identified ways that they could make investments in new housing construction. And they did just that. They invested about $225 million per year in new housing construction, both on affordable housing units as well as on single family homes. So those programs also went live this year. It'll probably take a while for them to actually be effective. But anytime you're making an investment of over $200 million a year, you're going to be able to build some more houses. So hopefully we'll start seeing the impacts of that investment here shortly.
Yeah, I think both of those programs are music to our members' ears. I know, as you mentioned, this homebuyer savings account has been something we've been working on for such a long time. So that was really exciting to see go through and seeing how many times we've had already. It really just goes to show how needed this program was, and that Ohioans are recognizing that and making that investment. And we all know down payments can oftentimes be a barrier to achieving that home ownership dream. And what a great way to help with that and assist with that. So really great work on that. And I know, the inventory too. And this new investment of this $225 million, that's just going to be so great to be able to help these homes get built that are so desperately needed around the state as we work on how to get more inventory and how to get more homes up for sale. So that's great news. And to be able to pass these two very important policies in the midst of everything that's been going on and surrounding the state house that you just broke down for us is really, really great. So everyone should be very excited and very happy about that.
This episode of The Real View is brought to you by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. Ohio's network of community colleges provides accessible training that accommodates the busy lifestyles of aspiring real estate professionals at half the price of a traditional university. With convenient locations in every part of the state, as well as online options, Ohio's community colleges are your smart choice for pre-licensing education. For more details or to start the journey to a real estate career, visit the education page at ohiorealtors.org and then click on the pre-license course locations.
So I want to hear kind of more about the future and what we should be focusing on now, what we can look forward to. What's kind of on top of mind for you, and what are you all working on for this session?
Yeah, Allison, our legislative team, we're tracking over 100 bills that could impact private property rights, property taxes, and really just the real estate industry as a whole. And so even though many bills aren't passing, this has kept us extremely busy because we're right around 800 bills that have been introduced, and we're tracking, like I said, about 100 of them. So it has been very busy for us. But one of the more pressing issues came to light because of the NAR settlement and the requirement that realtors must now enter into written representation agreements with their home buyers. And we approached this shortly after the settlement was announced. We had to come up with a way for the state of Ohio to standardize the use of these written agreements, because while the settlement applies to realtors, it doesn't apply to just the licensed real estate agent out there who may not be a member. And so the result, come August 17th, when these changes take effect, we would have two sets of standards, one for realtors and one for non-members regarding the use of written representation agreements. And so we went to work and introduced House Bill 466. And what this does, it requires a statewide standard for the use of these written representation agreements. And we were very, very excited to see this gain so much momentum so quickly. We had some great sponsors of the legislation, but then really it was our job to educate lawmakers why this was so necessary for the industry, why we needed some clear guidance on the use of these representation agreements in Ohio. And about 20 other states have passed legislation dealing with this issue. And so Ohio's a little bit late to the game, but we introduced this bill in late March of this year. We were able to pass it through the House of Representatives. I think it was the first week in May, and we're gaining a lot of traction in the Ohio Senate as well. And the goal is to pass this by the end of June, because come June, lawmakers recess until the November election. So with the industry changes happening in August, we knew we had to act quickly, and I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to get this done by the end of June. And like I said, not much has passed, and to pass a bill within the span of 3 or 4 months is almost unprecedented. And so very, very happy to get that done so quickly. And it goes back to that whole respect issue that I was talking about. We came to lawmakers and said, we need this done. And they took that to heart. And it would have been very easy for them to kind of delay any action on this, but they knew how important it was for us. So that was great to see quick passage, or hopefully quick passage, of this legislation. And then, Allison, also the housing shortage is not going away. I said the state made historic investments, but more needs to be done. And I don't know if the state's going to be in the position to invest another $200 million every single year. So we need to look at ways to reduce barriers, reduce costs, and make it easier to construct homes. And to the legislature's credit, at least the Ohio Senate anyway, they created a special committee solely focused on addressing the housing supply issue. And this committee spent about 8 months traveling around the state. They heard from hundreds and hundreds of witnesses testifying on how to improve or how to address the housing crisis facing the state. And that committee just issued a 100-page report in April. And most of those recommendations made in the report, they made 23 specific recommendations. Most are really looking at the local government side of things and barriers that local governments create in terms of kind of delaying or impeding housing development. Things like restrictive zoning laws, high permitting costs, lack of infrastructure. And so I think what will happen from this report, and it already has to a certain extent, lawmakers will start introducing legislation reflecting the recommendations in this report. And I don't know if it'll be done by the end of this year, but it sets the foundation to really pass some significant legislation going into next year and the next legislative session. But this was the most comprehensive review that lawmakers have really taken in terms of the housing supply issue. And Allison, kind of in that same vein, property taxes is another thing that has really just gained so much attention, and rightfully so. Every 6 years, county auditors update property values, and those are even updated every 3 years. So they conduct a full appraisal every 6 years, but the values are updated every 3 years. And as you can imagine, over the last 6 years, property values have just skyrocketed. And as values go up, typically so do property taxes. And we run the risk, Allison, of truly taxing people out of home ownership through no fault of their own. And unlike the income tax, where if you get a raise, you may pay more in income taxes, property taxes, you're not necessarily making more money. You did nothing wrong. Your lifestyle has not changed, but you owe hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars more in property taxes. And so the state is looking at trying to find ways to provide some sort of property tax relief. The House and the Senate created a joint committee to review property taxes, and that committee is required to issue recommendations and a report by the end of the year. So hopefully we see some sort of property tax relief here in the next year or so. But we have seen about 24 bills introduced addressing property taxes, things like enhancing the homestead exemption, creating some sort of a property tax circuit breaker to prevent taxes from going up over 5 or 10% a year, but nothing has been passed yet. So hopefully we can come to some sort of a solution to provide relief for property taxes. But those have been really some of the main issues that we've been working on.
Yeah, no, and that's really exciting about the buyer representation agreements. And as you mentioned, this is going to be included in the settlement through NAR that will go into effect on that August 17th date. But really great that it will become our state law. Fingers crossed that it will become our state law here in Ohio. And it's just really a great way to bring transparency to the real estate transaction. And I think it's something that both our members and our consumers are really going to benefit from, having these services laid out and in clear terms before they enter in the process of buying a home. I think it's really going to make a good difference to that. So great news on that. And I'm excited to announce that we will have Senator Michelle Reynolds coming on a special edition of Ohio Policy Talk here in the next couple weeks. So that's going to be really great to hear more about what you mentioned with this report. She's going to dive into some of the details of that for us. So stay tuned on that. That's going to be a really great episode as we get into more of the details and what's going to be the result of this study. And then property taxes. I mean, if you were at our Realtors at the Rotunda Day, that was such a great panel, very engaging, very so many factors go into this, right? And there's not just a one size fits all solution that's going to solve all of this problems of property taxes and how we can make that easier on Ohio homeowners. So much going on, such important topics too that are not easy to tackle. So more to come on all of that, but really great stuff to know, to keep our eye on as we head into the future. I want to talk about what happens when legislation is out there that we don't like, or that we don't agree with, or that we're not in support of, or that could be harmful to our industry. How do we handle that? And have you seen anything that we are working to fight against, or that we're trying to protect ourselves when it comes to anything out there like that?
Yeah. As much as I would like to say that we're just out there fighting for good policies, often, and maybe more often than not, we're fighting against bad policies from taking effect. And the lawmakers often think they have a good idea, but when they really find out what it truly means for the industry or for the state, they become aware that it wasn't that great of an idea. And one example, Allison, that we've kind of run into is dealing with occupational licensing and the requirements to be a licensed real estate professional in the state. Every 6 years, lawmakers review the requirements to be a licensed professional in the state, not just for real estate, but for every single profession out there. So doctors, dentists, teachers, really anything that requires a license, they review the requirements. And what they do, they typically look at our surrounding states and try to identify areas where Ohio has more restrictive laws than in our surrounding states. And many view those restrictions as posing a barrier to entering a profession. And if our surrounding states don't have it, Ohio would like to cut any unnecessary barriers. So this legislative session, all the licenses that are issued by the Division of Real Estate were being reviewed. And when it came to real estate salespeople, it was identified that in Ohio, we require salespeople to have 120 hours of pre-licensing education. In most of our surrounding states, they're right around 90 hours. And when we started this review process, lawmakers were solely focused on cutting the hours of pre-licensing education. One lawmaker even proposed cutting our licensing requirements to 40 hours to match Michigan's. And we quickly went to action. We testified on this bill, pushed back against any proposed reduction to our hours of pre-licensing education. And, we made the case of we need more qualified, higher qualified licensees operating in Ohio. We don't need to be cutting our standards when you're dealing with an individual's probably their biggest financial purchase that they will make in their lifetime. They need a qualified, educated professional guiding them through that process. And lawmakers started looking at other barriers that exist in Ohio that don't exist anyplace else. One of those, Allison, deals with what it takes to be an education provider, so a real estate school. Ohio requires our real estate schools to offer college credits that count towards a degree. Ohio is the only state, I believe, in the nation that has this requirement. And it really limits the type of schools and the number of schools that can come into the state. So you limit that competition, and that typically results in higher costs. And that's exactly is the case in Ohio. The cost to go to real estate school in Ohio is about $1,100 to $1,200, which is 3 to 4 times more expensive than any of our surrounding states. And so lawmakers looked at that requirement that real estate schools offer college credits, and they said, let's open this up. Let's allow more schools to provide this training. Let's provide proper oversight of these new schools that would come in. They would still need to be certified by the state, and they would still need to meet the education requirements. So the 120 hours, they would have to teach the certain categories. And so there would be proper oversight. But when you increase competition, you typically get better prices and better outcomes. And in this case, Ohio's outcomes currently aren't that great. Our test passage rate on the real estate exam is just over 50%. So we've been paying more and getting a poor outcome. And so hopefully this change will lead to better results at a better price. But that has led to a little bit of confusion. As you can imagine, there's some education providers out there that currently operate in Ohio that are pushing back against this change. They don't want more real estate schools coming into the state. And they recently reached out to a number of our members, urging them to oppose our position on this bill. And that has created a little bit of confusion among our members as well as among Ohio's elected officials. And so we've, again, going back to educating, we've had to not only educate our members of what's actually in this bill, but then educating lawmakers saying, hey, Ohio Realtors' position is that we support this change. Please don't get confused by a few outliers out there that are urging opposition to this, because it doesn't reflect our position.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that, anytime there's a situation like this or any legislation is out there that we're wanting our members to take a position on, that it's always good to get the answer straight from us before you think about taking any action on anything. So I just wanted to make that point and make sure our members and listeners know, always come to us before you do anything legislation wise. We're here to answer any of your questions and give you that guidance. So I just wanted to point that out.
That's a great point. And if any of our members are listening, if you get an email that doesn't identify themselves as Ohio Realtors, don't open it and don't send it off thinking that it came from us, because we will identify ourselves when we do any member engagement. So be on the lookout for that. And Allison, I do also need to highlight one other provision in this bill. There are also some changes being proposed to real estate brokers. Right now, Ohio, again, is unique that our real estate brokers must have 2 years of post-secondary education. So essentially, every broker needs an associate degree. That is, again, unique to the state of Ohio. Other states do not have that requirement. And what it has done is it prevents a lot of longtime salespeople, folks that have been practicing for 20 or 30 years, from transitioning into the role of a broker. And so that's another area that they saw Ohio had a barrier, and they wanted to remove that barrier. So that is being removed. Keep in mind that 2 years of post-secondary education did not need to be in real estate. It did not need to be in business. It could be in anything. It could have been in basket weaving. And it was kind of an arbitrary requirement that many folks thought were unnecessary. So that's another change being made to this bill. So we supported those two changes. And most importantly, we supported the fact that it did not cut our hours of pre-licensing education. So that bill's through the House of Representatives and is now in the Senate. So we need to continue to fight against any cut in hours, but we were able to show that we made some significant reductions in barriers, which will hopefully lower price of education, increase opportunities, and hopefully result in better outcomes.
Yeah, and keeping our realtors educated and, like you said, providing that great value and expertise to all of our clients as well. So it sounds like there's a lot going on, right? We talked about a lot. You are definitely busy for sure. So what does the schedule look like for the remainder of the year, and what can we expect as we head into the second half of the year?
Yeah, like I mentioned, the legislature will be in session until the end of June, and they try to pass as much legislation as they can, and then they'll break for about 5 months until the November elections. And they want to send lawmakers back home to campaign to try to get reelected. So the legislative activity over the summer will be limited, if any. So we are trying to get specifically the buyer representation bill passed, House Bill 466, by the time lawmakers break in June. When they do come back in November, it's called lame duck session, and it's typically the busiest time for us because of the 800 or so bills that I said have been introduced. If they do not pass by the end of the year, they need to get reintroduced at the beginning of the next session, which would be 2025. So you have lawmakers that have spent 2 years working on legislation, and it could have gone through nearly the entire process. But if it doesn't get passed, it starts back at square one next year. So it becomes a very hectic time for us. And that's typically when you see the most legislation passed, is at the very end of the year. So it'll be a busy November and December for us. But then we start a new session in 2025.
Yeah, definitely going to be very busy, a lot on your plates, a lot to work on. But I want to thank you again for everything that you do for the association, for our members, for homeowners around the state. You know, everyone benefits from the work that you all do here on behalf of us. So thank you again. And thanks for just giving this update today, sharing with us more what's going on. I know our listeners are going to really enjoy hearing this.
No, thank you so much.
And to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you next week. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to The Real View. That wraps up today's episode. You can keep up with the latest on the podcast at ohiorealtors.org/therealview and on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Have questions, comments, or suggestions? We want to hear from you. Email us at podcast@ohiorealtors.org. We'll see you next time.